It was 7 a.m. on a Tuesday when the sound of screaming metal ripped me out of bed. At first, I thought it was a car crash outside, until I heard bolts snapping above my head and glass hitting the driveway like gunfire. I stumbled to the window and froze. 3 men in orange safety vests were on my roof, tearing my solar panels apart with crowbars. Still half asleep, I bolted out the door, barefoot, wearing only boxers. The gravel in my driveway bit into my heels as I shouted, "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" One of them didn't even look up. "Sir, step back or we call the cops." Cops! They were dismantling $40,000 worth of equipment, my equipment, and I was the one who needed to step back? Then one of the workers pointed to the lawn. Standing there like she owned the neighborhood was Bryn Keller, president of the Pine Haven Estates HOA. Yoga pants, spotless white sneakers, blonde bob that didn't move an inch in the wind. She held a clipboard like it was a weapon and smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Violation notice," she said, waving a sheet of paper at me. "I have county permits," I told her. "Doesn't matter," she replied. HOA rules override county permits. Section 14(3), no exterior modifications without board approval. Behind her, one of the workers pried off a final panel. My inverter sparked, smoke rising in the morning air. The smell of burning plastic filled the yard like burning money. She turned away before I could respond, walking toward her Lexus parked by the curb. White, perfect. Vanity plate, sold it. That's when I knew she enjoyed this. But here's what she didn't know. Before I ever owned a home, before I ever cared about lawns or bylaws, I worked on power grids in Iraq. I spent 12 years as a Navy electrical engineer, rewiring substations where one bad circuit could shut down an entire base. When you've done that kind of work, you learn patience, you learn precision, and most importantly, you learn how much power really matters. So while Bryn thought she was teaching me a lesson, I was already calculating how to cut electricity to 87 homes, including hers. My name's Dex, I'm 52, divorced, and I live in Pine Haven Estates, a cookie-cutter suburb outside Denver, where every house looks like it came from the same Lowe's display. Beige seating, 2-car garages, lawns so identical you could use a ruler to measure the grass height, except mine. When I bought it, the house was a wreck, peeling paint, dead shrubs, a roof begging for retirement. It was all I could afford after the divorce, but it had one thing no other house on the block did, a south-facing roof that got 10 hours of sunlight a day. Perfect for solar. I'd spent 2 years saving 40 grand, every bonus, every consulting gig, to install a Tesla array and Powerwall battery. The plan was simple. Eliminate my $300 a month electric bill and put that money toward my daughter Skylar's college fund. She's 17, smart as hell, and wants to study environmental science at CU Boulder. The panels weren't just about electricity, they were about her future. I did everything by the book. Filed for county permits. Passed every inspection. The system went live in April. By June, I was producing more power than I used. Watching the meters spin backward felt like beating the system. What I didn't know was that Pine Haven's system was built for people like Bryn to never lose control. She'd moved here 5 years earlier with her husband, Councilman Troy Keller, a city council member who introduces himself using his title at barbecues. Bryn became HOA president 3 years ago, unopposed. Nobody cared enough to run against her. Most neighbors just wanted to mow their lawns, grill on weekends, and pretend they lived in harmony. But Bryn wasn't satisfied with harmony. She wanted uniformity. Every house had to look like a clone of her own, down to the mailbox paint and the brand of mulch. My house, too old. My truck, too loud. My personality, too independent. That's all it took for me to land on her radar. I later found out Troy sits on the city's energy committee and Rocky Mountain Power, our local monopoly, pays him consulting fees. Public record if you know where to look. My solar setup didn't just threaten her idea of aesthetic consistency. It threatened their cash flow. So when my panels went up and my meter started running backward, that wasn't just a violation of HOA decorum, it was a declaration of war. And on that Tuesday morning, she fired the first shot. I stood there bleeding from my heels, watching as the last of my panels hit the ground, shattered beyond repair. Bryn handed me her violation notice and said, Remove the panels in 30 days or face a $500 daily fine. Then she smiled again, one of those polished, real estate smiles, and drove off, leaving the smell of jasmine perfume and burnt circuits in her wake. I wanted to scream, to rip the clipboard from her manicured hands, but I didn't, because I'd learned long ago that revenge works better when it's quiet. Skylar came home from school that afternoon. She stopped dead in the driveway, staring at the wreckage. The project she'd written her college essay about, the one she said made her proud to call me her dad, was now a pile of broken glass. She cried right there on the asphalt, and I held her as the smoke faded. "Dad," she said through tears. "Why would they do this?" I didn't have an answer then. But in that moment, I made a promise, to her and to myself. Bryn Keller had just declared war on the wrong man. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from county zoning. Someone, a concerned neighbor, had filed a complaint claiming my installation violated building codes and was unsafe. The return address? Bryn's real estate office on Maple Street. She wasn't even trying to hide it. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules or regulations. It was personal. So I drove downtown to the county office, grabbed every permit copy I could find, and started building my own case. Because when you spend your life working on power systems, you know one truth better than anyone else. The person who controls the electricity controls everything. At the county building, the clerk barely looked up when I explained why I was there. I handed over my permits, the inspection documents, everything. She scanned them, shrugged, and said, "All valid. Whoever filed this complaint doesn't understand the system." "Oh, she understands," I muttered. "She just doesn't care." I left with certified copies and a new goal, find out exactly how far Bryn Keller's reach went. That night I couldn't sleep. The hum of the fridge sounded like the buzz of the inverter I used to have. Every creak in the house felt like electricity trying to find somewhere to go. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the violation notice. Section 14.3, it read, like some biblical curse written in bureaucracy. By midnight, I had my laptop open, diving into public records. County assessor files, HOA meeting minutes, city council payments. It didn't take long before the pieces started connecting like circuits on a board. Troy Keller, Bryn's husband, wasn't just on the City Energy Committee. He'd voted 3 times in the past year to renew Rocky Mountain Power's exclusive grid maintenance contract. His consulting fees added up to over $8,000 annually, and every HOA meeting summary mentioned consultation with energy partners, led by, who else? Bryn. It wasn't about neighborhood aesthetics. It was about profit, and I wasn't just a homeowner out of compliance. I was a threat to their income stream. The next morning, I called Marion, a friend of mine and an attorney who'd helped with my divorce. She answered on the second ring, voice calm, professional, but curious. "Dex, it's early. You in trouble again?" "You could say that," I said, explaining what happened, from the destruction on my roof to the zoning complaint. She was quiet for a long moment. "Did you record anything?" she finally asked. "No, but I've got photos. And witnesses. The workers were contractors. Good, keep everything. And Dex, don't retaliate yet. Not until I see the paperwork." She didn't say, "Don't retaliate ever." Just not yet. That was enough for me. 2 days later, Bryn struck again. This time, through social media, a post appeared on the Pine Haven Community Facebook group. Some homeowners refuse to follow community standards. It's unfortunate when people think they're above the rules designed to protect our property values. 43 reactions. Comments split between angry emojis and polite applause. Half the neighborhood thought she was talking about uncut lawns. The other half knew it was about me. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched. Comments started to snowball. Neighbors who'd never spoken up before began asking questions. "Is this about the solar guy? Didn't he have permits? Why tear them down?" It took less than an hour for Bryn to disable comments. Damage done. But then, like she always did, she doubled down. 2 days later, every mailbox in the neighborhood got a bright yellow envelope. "Special HOA meeting, mandatory attendance," it read in bold type. The agenda: emergency assessment vote for legal defense fund translation. Bryn wanted everyone to pay for her mess. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 2:00 p.m., a time chosen because most people were at work. Still, 19 homeowners showed up out of 87, barely enough for quorum. The vote passed 19 to 17. Just like that, Bryn authorized a $400 per household legal fund, $34,000, taken from people too tired or too busy to fight. When I got home that evening, my phone started ringing. Neighbors I'd never met, one after another. "Dex, is this really about solar panels? Why are we paying her legal fees? Can you show us the documents?" I sent everything: permits, letters, inspection forms, even screenshots of Troy's consulting payments I'd pulled from public records. Some believed me instantly. Others hesitated. But enough people started doubting her that something in Pinehaven began to shift. It wasn't visible yet, but it was there, like static before a storm. The next morning, a woman named Greta knocked on my door. Late 40s, retired teacher, lived 2 blocks down. She held a stack of papers. "Counter petition," she said. "We're demanding a financial audit. Want to sign?" I didn't just sign, I helped her organize. Within 48 hours, she had 31 signatures. Bryn's reply came through email. Audit not required until fiscal year end per bylaws. Your petition is noted. Translation: sit down and shut up. But it was too late for that. 2 families listed their houses for sale that week. One young couple holding a newborn stopped me while I was raking debris from the destroyed panels. "We can't deal with this stress anymore," the husband said. His eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. "We thought HOAs made life easier." Across the street, Bryn's Lexus gleamed in her driveway like a smug white shark. She even posted about the moving families online. Unfortunate that some homeowners would rather flee than fix problems caused by their neighbors. She was painting me as the villain. The gaslighting was world-class. That Friday, Marion called again. "We're filing a counterclaim," she said. $60,000 in damages, harassment, property destruction, due process violations. She also filed an ethics complaint against the HOA's attorney, Clayton Voss. Turns out he sat on the insurance board that covered the HOA's liability policy, a massive conflict of interest. By Friday afternoon, Clayton withdrew as counsel. Bryn had to find new lawyers, draining her war chest even faster. That's when I realized I didn't need to fight her directly. I just had to let her fight herself. But I wasn't done yet. See, I'd been studying Pinehaven's electrical layout for weeks. Every neighborhood like ours has a single point of failure, a transformer feeding all homes. One transformer meant one vulnerability. It sat on HOA-owned land near the playground, surrounded by overgrown shrubs and a broken safety sign. I spent 3 afternoons at the county records office flipping through old blueprints. The papers smelled like basement mildew and bureaucratic dust. But what I found made my pulse spike. The utility easement, the legal path for power access, ran directly through my property line. That made me a stakeholder in the transformer's access rights, which meant I had a say. I called Rocky Mountain Power's customer line, voice calm and casual. "Hi, yeah, I noticed the HOA's landscaping is blocking transformer access. Might be a safety violation. Missing signage, overgrowth, the works." The rep took my complaint. Inspection scheduled within the week. 3 days later, a utility van showed up. The inspector spent 40 minutes photographing the site, measuring clearances, checking load capacity. Before he left, he zip-tied a bright orange violation notice to the fence. I took pictures of it before Bryn could rip it down. The notice cited obstructed access, inadequate clearance, and my favorite, load capacity concerns. Full transformer assessment required. That transformer had been installed in 1998, 27 years old. Typical lifespan, 25 to 30. If the utility decided it needed replacement, the whole neighborhood would lose power for 2 to 3 days, except me. My Powerwall battery could run the house for 72 hours straight. The image played in my mind. Bryn's pristine house, dark and cold, while my living room glowed warm and bright. The irony was electric. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by blueprints, sipping coffee that tasted like quiet revenge. Outside, the transformer hummed in the distance like a countdown clock. and I couldn't help but smile. The power inspection report landed on Bryn's desk before the weekend was over. I knew because I saw her standing outside by the transformer that Saturday morning, hair pulled into a perfect knot, phone pressed tight to her ear. Her lips moved fast, angry. She was trying to convince someone, probably a city contact, that everything was fine. It wasn't. On Monday, the official notice came: scheduled maintenance, mandatory transformer replacement. Estimated duration, 72 hours. Work would begin the following Thursday. For the first time in a long while, Pine Haven's pristine calm cracked. Neighbors whispered in driveways. The HOA Facebook group was a war zone, half the posts about inconvenience, half about safety hazards. Bryn tried to control the narrative. This was scheduled maintenance, she posted, not caused by any complaint. I almost admired her nerve. But the comments told another story. Screenshots of the violation notice I'd quietly shared through direct messages had made their rounds. People knew who'd called the inspection, even if they didn't say it out loud. For once, the silence worked in my favor. On the morning of the replacement, I brewed a pot of coffee and stood by the window as the first Rocky Mountain power trucks rolled in. They tore out the old transformer, cables snaking across lawns like mechanical vines. One worker knocked on my door around noon. "You'll lose grid power for about 60 hours, he said. I smiled. Thanks for the heads up. When the neighborhood went dark that evening, my house stayed lit like a lighthouse. My solar batteries hummed quietly while everyone else stumbled around with candles and flashlights. At 9:13 p.m., my phone buzzed, an incoming call from an unknown number. I didn't need to answer to know who it was. I watched the caller ID fade out, then went back to my coffee. The next morning, Bryn was on my porch. She didn't knock. She just stood there, arms folded, her expression somewhere between disbelief and fury. "You did this," she said finally. I leaned against the doorframe. "Did what?" "Called for a safety inspection. That transformer was a hazard." Her jaw tightened. "You're trying to make me look incompetent," I shrugged. "You're doing that just fine on your own." She stepped closer, voice sharp. "You think you've won something here? You haven't. When this neighborhood sees what you really are, you'll wish you'd never moved here." I met her gaze and said nothing. Sometimes silence cuts deeper than words. She left without another word, but the sound of her heels on the walkway echoed like gunfire. By the next week, the HOA board was in chaos. 2 members resigned. Greta told me during one of our late-night phone calls that Bryn was calling emergency meetings almost daily. "She's unraveling," Greta whispered. "People are talking about removing her." "Let them talk," I said. Talking leads to action. Meanwhile, Marion had been busy. She'd filed formal complaints with the state's HOA Oversight Division, the Contractor Licensing Board, and the City Zoning Office. Each complaint triggered an investigation. The HOA's insurance company froze reimbursement funds until the matter was resolved. Bryn's precious legal defense fund, those $400 checks from every homeowner, was locked in limbo. The first real fracture came during an HOA town hall meeting 2 weeks later. Bryn stood at the front of the room, trying to explain why the HOA account was suddenly under audit. Her voice trembled slightly, though she hid it behind forced confidence. A man in the back raised his hand. "Is it true you had the solar panels removed without confirming permits?" Bryn froze. "That's not relevant to this. It's relevant if you used our dues to pay for the demolition," he shot back. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone else called out, "Where's the money now?" Bryn's composure cracked. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped, slamming the folder shut. It was beautiful. The next day, I walked past her house on my morning run. The Lexus was gone. Her porch lights were off, curtains drawn tight. Later that evening, Greta sent me a text. "She's been asked to step down temporarily while the audit completes." Temporarily, sure. But we both knew what that meant. For a moment, I felt almost bad. Almost. Then I looked at my roof. New panels gleaming under the sunset. Connected, legal, mine. And the feeling evaporated. But Bryn wasn't finished. Not yet. The audit revealed something none of us expected. Over the past 3 years, the HOA had made consulting payments totaling nearly $40,000 to a shell company registered under Troy Keller's name. The listed address? A P.O. box in the next town over. Greta called me, barely able to contain her excitement. We've got them. Both of them. Fraud, conflict of interest, you name it, Marion confirmed it. If this sticks, they'll lose everything. Their positions, their contracts, maybe even their house. The story spread through Pine Haven like a spark through dry grass. Homeowners began demanding refunds, meetings turned into shouting matches, and local news reporters started circling. Bryn's empire was crumbling. But I wasn't celebrating yet. People like her don't go down quietly. Sure enough, 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. I peeked through the blinds. A car idled by the curb. Dark SUV, tinted windows. After a moment, it drove off. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe not. The next day, my mailbox was filled with garbage, literal garbage. Someone had dumped old food wrappers, crumpled HOA flyers, and shredded documents inside. A petty move, but one that made me smile. It meant she was desperate. That evening, I installed a new set of cameras. Front porch, driveway, backyard. Every angle covered. If Bryn wanted to play dirty, I'd record every second. By the end of the week, the power company completed their final inspection and officially cleared my solar array. Certified, documented, legal, again. The same afternoon, I received an email from Marion. City Ethics Board accepted our filing. Keller hearing scheduled for next month. I stared at the screen, reread the line, and let out a slow breath. It was happening. The woman who'd tried to destroy my home, my peace, my independence, was about to face the same public humiliation she'd inflicted on everyone else. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger, I just had to tell the truth. The day of the ethics hearing arrived on a gray Thursday morning. The sky hung low, heavy with rain, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I parked 2 blocks from City Hall not because I had to, but because I wanted those extra minutes to think. It had been 5 months since Bryn tore the panels off my roof. 5 months since she smiled and told me, "You'll thank me someday." Now, she was the one waiting to be judged. Inside, the hearing room buzzed with low voices and shuffling papers. A long wooden table divided the space, city officials on one side, complainants and respondents on the other. Marion sat next to me, calm and focused. Across the table, Bryn and Troy whispered furiously with their new attorney, a man who looked like he regretted taking the case. The chairwoman called the session to order. "We are here to review the complaint filed by Dexter Cole and attorney Marion Wells against Bryn Keller, president of the Pine Haven Homeowners Association, and Troy Keller, contractor and consultant." Bryn sat up straighter, lips tight. She still dressed the part. Flawless blazer, pearls, perfect posture. But the confidence behind it was cracked. Marion began with precision. Over the course of 3 years, the respondents diverted HOA funds to a private entity, Keller Consulting, without board approval. Additionally, they authorized the removal of legally permitted solar installations belonging to my client, causing physical and financial damage. She laid out the timeline like a symphony. Dates, invoices, signed checks. Every detail lined up like dominoes waiting to fall. Bryn tried to interrupt once, twice, but each time the chairwoman silenced her. "You'll have your turn, Mrs. Keller." When it came, her defense was shaky. "These payments were reimbursements for advisory work. My husband provided valuable expertise on energy efficiency." One of the board members adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Keller, why were those payments made to a company registered at a P.O. box?" Bryn hesitated. "It's standard practice for consultants." The board member raised an eyebrow. "Under your own bylaws, consulting contracts require board approval and public documentation. We found none." You could feel the temperature in the room drop. Troy tried to step in, voice strained. "We did everything transparently. The HOA needed direction." Marion smiled slightly. "Direction doesn't come with unreported kickbacks," the room murmured. Someone coughed. The board chair leaned forward. "Mrs. Keller, you also authorized the destruction of compliant property without verifying permits, correct?" Bryn's jaw worked silently before she found words. We believe the installation violated neighborhood aesthetics. And when your belief proved false? The chairwoman asked softly. Bryn's face flushed crimson. We acted in good faith. Marion's response was quiet but sharp. Good faith doesn't excuse abuse of power. For the first time since all this began, Bryn didn't have a comeback. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't prepare a speech. I just told the truth. I bought a home in Pine Haven because I thought it was a community, I said. Instead, I found control, intimidation, and greed. They didn't just destroy property, they tried to destroy trust. This wasn't about panels or aesthetics. It was about power. Bryn glared at me, her eyes full of venom. But I didn't look away. After my statement, the board adjourned for deliberation. We waited outside in the hallway, me, Marion, and a few homeowners who'd come for support. Greta showed up clutching a thermos of coffee, smiling nervously. I can't believe this day finally came, she whispered. Believe it, I said. It's only just starting. 37 minutes later, the board returned. Their ruling was clear and brutal. Bryn Keller was found in violation of 3 ethics codes: misuse of community funds, abuse of authority, and conflict of interest. Her presidency was terminated effective immediately. She was barred from holding any HOA position for 10 years. Troy Keller's contractor license was suspended pending further investigation. The board also referred their case to the state attorney general's office for possible criminal review. The hammer fell with quiet finality. Bryn's face went pale. Her husband leaned in, whispering something, but she didn't react. Her eyes were locked on the table, unfocused. When the hearing adjourned, she brushed past me in the hallway, perfume sharp and heavy in the air. You think this is over? She hissed. I met her eyes. No, but it's no longer your game. For the first time, she didn't reply. She just walked away, heels echoing against the marble floor, each step fainter than the last. Outside, rain had started to fall in thin silver sheets. I stood under the awning for a long time, watching the drops strike the pavement. It felt quiet, not victorious, not triumphant, just quiet. Marion joined me, her coat pulled tight. You did good, she said. I didn't do anything, I replied. She did it to herself. Greta laughed softly behind us. Still, you flipped the switch. Maybe she was right. Over the next few weeks, Pine Haven transformed. The new interim HOA board voted to refund part of the legal assessment. The Facebook group went silent, replaced by real conversations on porches and sidewalks. People waved again. Kids played outside. My phone stopped buzzing with conflict. The house felt lighter somehow. Then, one evening near dusk, as I stood on my newly rebuilt roof, tightening the final bolts of a fresh solar panel, I saw a moving truck pull up to Bryn's house. 2 men carried boxes to the curb. Then a black SUV appeared, and Bryn herself stepped out, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt. No pearls, no perfect hair. Just tired eyes. She stood there for a long time, staring at the house that used to be her kingdom. Then she got back in the car and drove off without looking back. No one waved. A month later, Pine Haven voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. The motion passed 61-22. It was over. At least that's what I thought. One night, as I reviewed power logs from my system, I noticed something strange. A spike. A data ping from an old HOA surveillance camera, one that should have been deactivated after the board's dissolution. The timestamp? 2 days earlier, someone had accessed the HOA's internal network from an external IP. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was someone cleaning up digital records. But as I stared at the flickering line on my screen, a thought crept in. What if Bryn wasn't done after all? 2 nights after I saw that strange data ping, sleep stopped coming easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the hum of power lines, the faint whisper of a transformer somewhere deep in the dark. Old habits die hard. When you've spent years wiring military bases, you start noticing when something feels off. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a text. Nice setup, Dex. Shame if someone tripped a breaker. No name, no emoji, just static menace. My stomach tightened. I traced the message to a burner app, untraceable. But I didn't need a trace to guess who it was. Bryn, that same morning, a few neighbors called. Their outdoor lights were flickering, their security systems randomly rebooting. Power fluctuations, they said. Coincidence, maybe? But I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. By noon, I was at the Pinehaven transformer site, the same one I'd exposed months ago. The violation notice still clung to the fence, faded and flapping in the wind. I ducked under the caution tape and followed the hum to the control box. Someone had tampered with it. Not professionally, just reckless enough to be dangerous. Cut wires. Forced panel. Signs of revenge. I called Marion first. She answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. She's back, I said. Bryn. She's trying to make the neighborhood pay, literally. Sabotaging the grid. Do not touch anything, she warned. I'll call the sheriff's office. But patience was never my strong suit. I crouched by the panel, scanning the connections. Whoever did this hadn't known what they were doing. They'd crossed a ground wire with a live phase, enough to blow the whole circuit if pressure built. My hands worked instinctively, steady and sure. I'd done this 1,000 times under worse conditions, except the enemy hadn't usually been my former HOA president. 20 minutes later, I restored the line. Lights blinked back across the neighborhood one by one. A wave of returning warmth and order. That night, Bryn was arrested. Sheriff deputies found her in a rental cabin outside Boulder. Laptop open, connection logs pulled from the HOA server. She'd been remotely accessing security cameras, scanning old emails, trying to find dirt to justify her crimes. One of the tampering tools matched a purchase made on her credit card. The charge? Electrical repair kit. The irony was delicious. I attended the trial only once, on the day of sentencing. Bryn stood before the judge, pale and quiet, her hair grown out, no longer the untouchable queen of Pinehaven. She pleaded guilty to multiple counts: property damage, fraud, and unlawful surveillance. 18 months in state custody, followed by probation. When the judge read the sentence, Bryn didn't look at anyone. She just stared at the floor. I waited outside the courthouse afterward. As she was led out in cuffs, she saw me through the glass doors. For a second, our eyes met. Her look wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to resignation, and maybe, somewhere beneath that, regret. I drove home under a clear sky. The sun broke through clouds like it had been waiting for permission. Pinehaven shimmered, rooftops alive with solar reflection. Skylar met me at the door, holding a stack of mail. "Final notice from the court," she said. "You're officially reimbursed." Inside the envelope was a check for damages, plus the legal costs Bryn's assets had covered after liquidation. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the closure. "Guess the system finally worked for once," I said. Skylar smiled. "You taught it how to." We spent that afternoon cleaning the new panels together. She played her music, some soft indie band I didn't recognize. The sunlight turned her hair gold. "You ever think about moving?" she asked. I looked around at the quiet streets, kids laughing somewhere down the block, the smell of barbecue drifting through the air. "No," I said. "This place finally feels like home." Later that evening, Pinehaven held its first post-HOA gathering. No board, no rules, just neighbors. People brought dishes. Kids rode bikes without being scolded. Someone hooked a speaker to a solar battery and played classic rock until sunset. Greta raised her cup. "To Dex for flipping the switch." Everyone cheered. I just laughed, but as night fell and the party faded, I stayed outside a little longer. The neighborhood glowed not from fear anymore, but from light people had built themselves. A patchwork of independence. Then my phone buzzed again, unknown number, a single text. "Still watching." I froze. My first instinct was paranoia, but then I looked up. On the ridge above Pinehaven, a drone hovered, blinking red and green against the stars. My first thought was Bryn. My second thought was worse. Someone else had taken her place. I walked to my garage, pulled down the panel on the Powerwall system, and checked the network logs. A new IP address, unfamiliar, out of state. Someone was scanning my setup remotely. "Dad?" Skylar stood at the door, worried. "Everything's fine," I said. But inside, I knew it wasn't over. Bryn had been the face of corruption, not the root of it. Her husband's consulting connections, Rocky Mountain Power's hidden influence, the city council's silence. Those pieces still sat untouched, waiting for someone to look deeper. That night, I sat at my workbench surrounded by blueprints, scribbled notes and a cup of cold coffee. The hum of electricity filled the air like a heartbeat. If they wanted a fight, they'd pick the wrong neighborhood again. By midnight, I'd already started drawing new schematics, a distributed network that would let homeowners share surplus energy directly, bypassing corporate grids altogether. A system that couldn't be shut down, bribed, or sabotaged. The Pine Haven Solar Co-op 2.0. This time, there'd be no single point of failure. No president. No councilman. No Bryn, just people connected by light. 3 months later, local news covered the launch. Pine Haven Community powers itself, the headline read. They called me the man who turned suburban war into renewable peace. I didn't care about titles. I cared about results. Skylar came home for summer break and joined the co-op as an intern, helping install panels for new neighborhoods. She'd started designing modular microgrids, her way of carrying the torch forward. "Think we'll ever stop fighting people like Bryn?" she asked one evening as we stood watching the sunset. "No," I said, "but we'll keep winning one circuit at a time." The air buzzed faintly, the sound of energy flowing between rooftops. The lights across Pine Haven flickered on in perfect unison. And for the first time since it all began, I felt something close to peace. Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that comes from rebuilding what was broken, with your own 2 hands. I looked toward the horizon, where the mountains cut black against the orange sky. Somewhere beyond them, the world still spun with greed, corruption, and power games. But here, for now, we'd flip the switch. "Come on," I said to Skylar, nodding toward the porch. "Let's watch the lights turn themselves on." She smiled, and together we did. The panels glowed faintly, storing tomorrow's light as the stars came out. Quiet proof that even after the darkest night, power always finds a way back home.